Alright, what is up guys, Team Yugi Fails here again, and like I said in the last video discussing the ban list, I'm going to be posting now a video showing what, in my opinion, is the best decks going into this format. So I didn't start in Deck Constructor because I didn't want to give away my honorable mention at first. I just felt like I wanted to start here and leave it as a surprise, so I'm going to click Deck Constructor and show you guys the honorable mention at the start of the video, because I am only doing 5 top decks. I'm not going to do 10. There are other decks that I think are fully viable that I just didn't put on there. So for the other slots, I'm not going to go down the other list, but other decks that I didn't put in the video, and I'll just read them off real quick, are Dinosaurs, Trickstars, Altergeist, Invoked, Prank Kids, and Mermail. Those are other decks that I think are fully viable in the format. Now, the rest of the stuff is going to be the honorable mention and then the top 5 decks, so let's hop into it. So for our honorable mention, we have Burning Abyss. This deck I think is going to be super strong with the release of Cherubini and Dark Neostorm. It's really good going first or second. It doesn't have a particular weak matchup. I mean, you could lose to Sky Striker, but there are ways to play around it. It's really not too difficult to play around the deck. With the amount of resiliency this deck has, you shouldn't struggle at all. The deck is a lot of fun to play. Does have a high learning curve though. That's the only difficult part about it. A lot of neat combos that you can fit in here. This is kind of my teched out version with the Galluses and the Mathematician, the Edge Imp Sabers, the Destrudos, and the Mare are pretty good too. But overall, I think this deck is a really solid match in the upcoming meta. I think going into Nationals, you'll definitely see 2 of these in the top cut at least, specifically in North America. In Europe, you'll probably see more. The Europeans have a larger obsession with this deck than we do over here in the States, but that's just how they are. But let's move on to the best deck, number 5 for the format. And we have Subterrors. So this deck is a very control-based deck. It does have a lot of thinking behind it. It's a very slow-paced deck. However, with Super Poly going to 2, the deck does get a little bit of a boost because you don't really need much of an extra deck. So you can just fusion your opponent's stuff off with Super Poly, seeing you're playing Extravagance, and you'll probably have at least one other material left. So there are a lot of cool cheeky plays you could do there. Has a really good Sky Striker matchup, especially with there can only be one, and side decking things like lose 1 turn. This deck just does some pretty crazy stuff. I think it has a really good shot in this upcoming meta. But let's hop on to deck number 4. If Dueling Book wants to load. There we go. So we have Pendulum Endymion, not necessarily saying it's going to be Magicians. It could be any version of Pendulums for the most part. I think that as a whole, Pendulums are absolutely busted, and the Endymion stuff makes it even better. There's so many cool cards that are out right now that makes this deck super strong and powerful, and I think the Guard Dragons are a nice addition to it as well, where you can play these really neat plays with it. Ending on an excessive amount of negates is also a lot of fun. The only problem is we have only 1 copy of Electrumite, and if your Electrumite gets Veilered or Ogred, something along the lines of that, unfortunately you struggle. But outside of that, I think the deck has a really good shot to continue and show us some success. Let's hop on to deck number 3. Deck number 3. I am putting Sky Strikers at number 3, and people are going to give me so much trash talk and heat for this, and that's okay. I welcome all the trash talk. It honestly entertains me most of the time. But looking at the way that Sky Strikers get hit with Kagari, yes, there are cool tech plays that you can do, like Magnet Reverse, which is currently kind of getting bought out on TCG Player. Because you just revive your Kagari back from the graveyard and you keep going. Sure, that's cool, but you have to be able to get that card in your hand and everything. It's not guaranteed. like other copies of Kagari are. I still think the deck is strong and powerful, don't get me wrong. I just think that with Kagari to 1, it kind of slowed it did slow its consistency. Even though Kagari is an extra deck monster, you can't consistently get Kagari out every single turn to add cards back, which is kind of the pain of it. But outside of that, you still have 2 multi-roll, still have 3 engage, 3 anchor. The deck can still do stuff. Going on to number 2. Number 2, I decided to put Danger, Thunder, Guard Dragon, whatever you want to call it. My list is always really interesting. This is my current favorite deck of the format. I love playing this deck so much. It's just that when I do play it excessively, I get a very large headache from thinking too much. So I don't play it as much right now. I play a lot of other fun decks where I don't have to do much thinking. But with this deck, it has a good matchup against just about everything. Salamangreat can out some of the things on the field, but to be honest, it's difficult for them to clear your whole board. This deck didn't take too huge of a hit. Yes, Summon Sorceress got banned. Yes, Sky Blaster went to 1. But other than that, nothing really happened. If you're playing Dark Matter, then you don't play Dark Matter anymore, which is fine. I personally never played Dark Matter in the deck. I just wasn't a huge fan of it. I liked making the Abyss and the Zombie Stein more, so I kind of stuck to that version. And it's worked out fairly well for me. I really enjoy this list, and the fact that you can use Eclipse Wyvern, dumping it to grave, or special summoning off of Agripane, whatever way you have to. Then you can banish a Phantasme off of Wyvern, and then when you banish the Wyvern, you have a free Phantasme in your hand. That's really, really powerful. So being able to do that gives you some extra plays. But I think this deck has a very good shot. Obviously, it hasn't won a YCS yet, and that's the full meme right now. It hasn't won the big event yet. I think going into Nationals, though, this deck has quite the wicked shot of winning. I think it's definitely gonna make it in that top cut, and probably at least one of these decks will make it into the top 4. I can call it right now. I can guarantee at least one Thunder Dragon in top 4 Nationals this year, because the deck really didn't get touched that much, and it's still powerful. But that's just my opinion. But let's go into the number 1, and everyone already knows what it is because they've already seen the decks that I've shown on here. And it's going to be Salamangreat. So there are a couple of reasons behind me putting this deck at the number 1 slot. It's going to have the highest representation of any deck in the format because it's the cheapest deck in the format, depending on the variation you play, the cards that you buy for it. Generally speaking, though, it is the cheapest deck of the format from a budget player's perspective, because you're buying 3 structure decks and a couple other cards for support, and then you have a full meta deck. So this deck is going to be very, very powerful against several things during the national season. It has a lot of counters. It is very resilient to being stopped. Basically, if they cut you off at the right point, yes, you're going to struggle, but you can still probably make some sort of play. Whereas some other decks, they can't continue playing if you completely cut them off and shut them out. So this deck, I think, has such a powerful shot of being able to counteract its own counters, as well as counter the current meta of Sky Strikers, Thunder Dragons, and everything else. I don't think this deck has an excessively bad striker matchup like everyone claims it does. I think with the amount of hand traps that you play, it makes playing this deck a whole lot more simple. Lady Debug went to 1, which sure, you can play Flame Bufferlos if you want. I opt to main deck 2 Twin Twisters rather than play 2 Bufferlos. I didn't like Bufferlo. I felt like I wasn't getting the maximum amount of value out of it. It just didn't help me as much. So I opted to just play the Twin Twisters to out the Mirror Match and Sky Striker if I need to. I think that's probably the best thing that you could do. But really, really simple deck, super fun to play for the most part. It is very linear, so you're doing the same thing every turn, but chances are, looking at it, I think this deck is going to win Nationals, personally. If it doesn't, it'll probably be Thunder Dragon. I don't think Striker's going to win Nationals. I think people just play around it too well now. Don't get me wrong, I think there's going to be a good amount of Striker and Top Cut at Nationals, but I think Salaman Great is still going to come out on top of Nationals, regardless of me being a Thunder Dragon fanboy over here. But that's my personal opinion on what I think the top 5 decks are, including our honorable mention Burning Abyss that was thrown in the mix too. So that's what I think we're looking at for this current format until after National season. Hopefully, you know, it's a solid variety of Nationals in the Top Cut. I'd love to see a good mix up. But if you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and comment in the section down below. And this is Team Yugi Fails signing out.